Good morning, Doug. Good morning to the audience. I'm here with, my name is Joshua Olshan from Auction Advisors. Most of you know me, I believe. I am here with Douglas Pick from Pick and Zibicki. Doug is a bankruptcy attorney. And just in case, we only have about 10 minutes of an interview before the networking starts. So in case people want to follow up with Doug and ask him any questions, I'm going to provide his number up front. We'll do it again, 212-695-6000, extension 223, or you can be reached at dpick, D-P-I-C-K, at picklaw.net. So if anyone wants to follow up with him on anything discussed or anything else, feel free. With that being said, I'm going to dive right into the questions because we don't have a lot of time. So, Doug, we all know that not too long ago, Congress enacted a new law entitled the Small Business Reorganization Act of 2019, also known by many as Subchapter 5 of Title 11. And mostly it was designed to help small businesses. I know that you have filed a lot of cases taking advantage of this new legislation. So I was hoping that briefly, from your point of view, you can go through some of the advantages of filing under Subchapter 11, as opposed to filing a typical Chapter 11 case.
Sure. In response to your question, Subchapter 5 was recently enacted by Congress. It's God's gift to bankruptcy attorneys. It is a much less expensive way to go through the bankruptcy process if you have a debt that is predominantly business related. It's faster. You have to file a plan within 90 days, which is doable. There's no disclosure statement that's required. There's no voting. There's no application of the absolute priority rule. Theoretically, under this new statute, you could, and I have done this as a matter of fact, you could file a person in bankruptcy on day one, literally file a plan within 60 to 90 days, and have the person out of bankruptcy within 5 months. And it really has literally no impact on his life. He's in, he's out, it's a short window, and the expense is incredibly reduced. It's that fast. And the best part about it is, if you have one disgruntled creditor, you can outdo him. There's no voting. You can get a plan confirmed.
All right, thank you. I guess since Subchapter 5 does not require the filing of the disclosure statement, as you just explained, right, the absolute priority rules do not apply. Right. And seemingly there's little to no voting to say of. Would you expect that Subchapter 5 filings will be more easily to confirm? And what has been your experience in that respect?
Oh, absolutely. Anybody who files a bankruptcy petition now has to look at Subchapter 5 as the first avenue to pursue. So as long as your debts are less than $7.5 million, you're engaged in a business or commercial activity, and 50% or more of your debts are business related, anyone who doesn't utilize Subchapter 5 is making a mistake. And the best advantage of it all is you always get that Chapter 11 case in which you have one creditor, it's just an unhappy puppy, and he opposes everything you want to do. And Subchapter 5 allows you to get around that unhappy puppy and get a plan confirmed. And again, at a fraction of what it would cost you to do it in Chapter
11. All right. Again, very briefly, I guess one of the necessary elements, and this gets talked about a lot, of Subchapter 5 is that the debtor must be engaged in some kind of commercial or business activity. What does that mean? How have you seen that interpreted? And what, specifically adding the words activities to the element mean?
That's key. The key provision, and not a lot of attorneys have done the research, I think, because the arguments I've heard before a judge seem to contradict the argument, but the case law is clear. By adding the word activities to being in a commercial or business entity, expands the role of Subchapter 5 incredibly broad, meaning if you're liquidating a company, that's a pending business activity. if you hold the stock in a bank account of a corporate entity and utilizing for whatever reasons, that's a business activity. If you are liquidating company, holding stock in a litigation, business activity, even though the corporation is stopped, it's still deemed a business activity. The court is widely interpreting that phrase to bring in as much as it can under subchapter 5. The word activities is really the key word there.
All right. So another element of the subchapter 5 case is that not less than 50% of the debt must have arisen from the commercial or business activity of the debtor. And this is, I guess, the last question because of timing. I believe you had once mentioned a case that you filed under Chapter 5 where the opposing counsel, I think it was a big New York law firm, represented an unhappy judgment creditor with a claim of approximately $6.5 million, which included some interest which had been accruing back for a number of years, and that was against a celebrity client. You had told me at the time that the law firm objected to the subchapter 5 designation, predominantly because they wanted to control the unsecured voting class. And they wanted to vote eventually against any plan that you were going to file. Most surprisingly, as I recall, you allowed it. You had something up your sleeve. Maybe you could explain what your thinking was and educate us a bit on that point.
That's a fascinating case, the one that you're bringing up now. Absolutely fascinating. It's a situation, and I think everyone's going to love this story. Just to give you one example of a number of cases that we've handled in subchapter 5, there's a state court litigation. It goes back 10, 11 years ago. In the state court litigation, it involved a plaintiff who's a very successful hedge fund investor and a defendant who was his fiancée, a celebrity. And they were going to get married, and they had an agreement that he would build a house on one of her properties. And he would get an interest in that house based upon the value of the land. But as all relationships sometimes end up, they broke up. And he was angry. And he wanted his money back. He invested $2.5 million in building the home on her property. And she did not want to give him 22 pennies, nothing. They litigated. She lost. The judge awarded the hedge fund $2.5 million and 11 years of interest at 9% under the statutory framework of CPLR Section 504, which brought that up to somewhere around $6.3 million, which she didn't have unless we liquidated every single piece of property she owned, including her horses, the houses, her bank accounts. It was going to wipe her out. So I filed her under subchapter 5. And the opposing counsel, as you would suspect, immediately opposed. This is a consumer transaction, they argued. This is a romantic relationship that went bad. They had a house. The house is going to be where they're going to get married and live in, and the like. The testimony at trial, I read every single transcript, said that this was a business investment. And if I litigated the issue, there's no ands, ifs, or buts that I could win. I could make it stay in subchapter 5, which would take away their ability to vote against my plan, which they were very upset over. They wanted control of the plan. They wanted the control of the vote. They wanted to sell everything she had. The attorneys picked up the persona of the client, pure anger, no talking to them. So we never really got into a conversation with them because they just simply said, I want it in chapter 11. But I knew something apparently they didn't know. What I knew was Congress in the state of New York just changed the law. and this is relevant. This impacts everything. Under the new statute that Congress, and it's in litigation right now, but what Congress did in New York was they modified section CPL, they modified CPLR 5004 to provide that the interest factor on consumer debts because of COVID is reduced from 9% to 2%. As a result of that change, and if you read the statute very closely, and it's not a well-drafted statute, but what it clearly says, as badly drafted as it is it's retroactive. So it goes back 11 years in my case. So I had the accountants draw up the numbers, I did the numbers, and the judgment will be reduced by more than 50% as a result. In other words, the judgment will be down to $3 million. You know, the interest on 2% interest is not a lot of money. So I had to call everybody and convince them to allow the conversion to Chapter 11, which meant, and which I was called, you know, crazy, and why would I do that? And I had to explain to everybody, and everybody eventually agreed. But because they argued it, there was one other concept, judicial estoppel. So the fascinating issue about this case is the fact that under the concept of judicial estoppel, I couldn't tell the judge why I was consenting to the conversion, because if I said to the judge I was consenting, then an argument could be made that judicial estoppel wouldn't apply to this case. So we had the hearing, kept my mouth shut, fine, convert, that's all I said. No, I'm not opposing it. Case converted, judgment is down to now $3 million. To give you a little bit of background on it, what I discovered after the fact, this is a good law firm. It's like 50, 60 attorneys at that law firm. They didn't know about the change in the law. We just saved $3 million because they didn't know, and I consented. So yeah, subchapter 5 works for you in 99% of the cases, but sometimes look at the facts really, really closely, and you could take advantage by filing bankruptcy and going to a Chapter 11. Bankruptcy just reduced the debt by over $3 million. It's an economic tool, works for everybody. Subchapter 5 is the best.
All right, thank you, Doug.
Awesome.
Feel free to call Doug with any other questions. I am going to move. Next,
yeah, we're now all going to move into the, thanks a lot, Doug. Thanks, Josh. I'm going to remove you guys. And we are now going to move into, it should be illuminated on the left-hand side of your screen. You should be able to click on the networking, and let's do the one-on-one networking till you're done. And if you're waiting, that just means somebody is, everyone's in a meeting, and then as soon as they pop out, you'll be able to go to the next meeting. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to the networking. I'm going to stop the broadcast now. Thank you.